The rotor blades sliced through the crisp morning air as Prince William gripped the controls of the Apache helicopter, his hands steady despite the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. Below him, the sprawling countryside of England stretched endlessly, but his mind was focused on something far greater than the landscape. This wasn't just another training flight or royal duty. This was the moment when a future king would honor the legacy of his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, while forging his own path as the newly appointed Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps. The sound of the helicopter's engines wasn't just mechanical noise. It was the heartbeat of a military tradition that had shaped British aviation for decades. As William maneuvered through the sky, he carried with him the hopes of thousands of servicemen and women who had served before him, and those who would serve under his leadership. Every movement of the aircraft represented not just his personal journey from prince to pilot to military leader, but the evolution of the British Armed Forces itself. This flight would become more than a ceremonial gesture. It would mark the beginning of a new chapter in royal military leadership, one that blended tradition with innovation, respect for the past with vision for the future. The young prince who had once dreamed of flying was now the man responsible for guiding one of the most elite aviation units in the world. William Arthur Philip Lewis Windsor had always been fascinated by the machines that conquered the sky. Even as a young boy running through the corridors of Kensington Palace, he would often pause at windows to watch aircraft pass overhead, his eyes tracking their movement with the intensity of someone who knew his destiny lay among the clouds. His mother, Princess Diana, often found him in the palace gardens, arms stretched wide, pretending to be an airplane as he raced across the manicured lawns. The seeds of his aviation passion were planted early, but they grew from more than just childhood wonder. The British royal family had a long and distinguished relationship with military aviation, dating back to his great-grandfather, King George VI, who had served as a flight lieutenant in the Royal Naval Air Service during World War I. His grandfather, Prince Philip, had earned his pilot's wings in the Royal Navy, and his father, King Charles III, had trained as a helicopter pilot with the Royal Navy. Aviation wasn't just a career choice for the Windsors. It was a family tradition that connected them directly to the men and women who served in Britain's armed forces. When William was old enough to understand the weight of royal responsibility, his parents made sure he understood that being a prince wasn't about privilege alone. It was about service, dedication, and leading by example. His mother, Diana, had shown him how to connect with people from all walks of life, while his father had demonstrated the importance of duty and commitment to the Commonwealth. But it was during his teenage years that William began to see how these lessons could be applied to military service. The turning point came when he was 17, during a visit to RAF Cranwell with his father. As they toured the facilities, William met young pilots who were barely older than himself, men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting British interests around the world. He watched them train, saw their dedication, and listened to their stories about life in the cockpit. That day, something clicked in his mind. He realized that military service wasn't just another royal duty to be performed. It was an opportunity to truly serve his country in a meaningful way. His decision to pursue military training after university wasn't met with universal approval. Some members of the royal household worried about the risks involved, particularly given the dangerous nature of helicopter operations. Others questioned whether a future king should be placed in harm's way. But William was determined. He had seen how his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had earned respect through her service during World War II, and he wanted to follow in her footsteps. The young prince's path to aviation began at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, where he underwent the same rigorous training as every other officer cadet. He woke at dawn, endured grueling physical training, learned military tactics, and studied the principles of leadership that would guide him throughout his career. His instructors treated him no differently than any other cadet, and William appreciated this equality. For the first time in his life, he was being judged purely on his abilities and determination, not his royal status. During his time at Sandhurst, William excelled in leadership exercises and demonstrated a natural aptitude for understanding complex tactical situations. His fellow cadets respected him not because he was a prince, but because he pulled his weight and never asked for special treatment. When the grueling training exercises stretched long into the night, William was there alongside his comrades. When morning inspections demanded perfection, his uniform was as crisp and his boots as polished as anyone else's. The moment he had been working toward came during his final term at Sandhurst, when he was given the opportunity to experience different branches of the military. It was during a helicopter familiarization flight that William knew he had found his calling. As the aircraft lifted off the ground, he felt a sense of freedom and purpose that he had never experienced before. The complexity of helicopter flight, the precision required to master the controls, and the knowledge that these skills could be used to save lives or protect his fellow service members made the choice clear. After commissioning as an officer in the Blues and Royals Regiment, William immediately began pursuing his helicopter pilot's license. The training was intense and demanding, requiring months of study and practice to master the intricate systems that kept the aircraft airborne. He learned about aerodynamics, weather patterns, navigation, and emergency procedures. Every day brought new challenges, and every flight test was an opportunity to prove himself worthy of the responsibility that came with military aviation. His instructors were impressed by his dedication and natural ability. Flying helicopters wasn't just about technical skill. It required quick thinking, steady nerves, and the ability to make life-or-death decisions under pressure. William demonstrated all of these qualities during his training, earning the respect of seasoned pilots who had seen countless students come and go. He approached each lesson with humility and determination, understanding that overconfidence in aviation could be fatal. The day William received his pilot's wings was one of the proudest moments of his young life. Standing in formation with his fellow graduates, he understood that this wasn't just a personal achievement. It was the beginning of a new chapter in royal service. He was now qualified to fly some of the most sophisticated aircraft in the world, and with that qualification came the responsibility to use his skills in service of others. His first assignment took him to RAF Valley in Wales, where he would train as a search and rescue pilot. The base, located on the rugged coast of Anglesey, was known for its challenging flying conditions and the life-saving work performed by its helicopter crews. For William, it represented the perfect opportunity to put his skills to work in a role that would directly benefit the people he would one day serve as king. The transition from training to operational flying was significant. No longer was he practicing emergency scenarios in controlled conditions. He would now be responding to real emergencies, where people's lives hung in the balance. The weight of this responsibility was something William embraced rather than feared. He understood that every call they received represented someone in desperate need of help, and he was determined to be worthy of their trust. Life at RAF Valley was different from anything William had experienced during his royal upbringing. The base was a working military installation where helicopters launched at all hours of the day and night, responding to emergencies across Wales and the Irish Sea. The pilots and crew members lived in a constant state of readiness, knowing that at any moment they might be called upon to risk their own lives to save others. William's crew mates quickly accepted him as one of their own. In the helicopter, royal titles meant nothing. What mattered was competence, reliability, and the ability to work as part of a team under extreme pressure. During their first mission together, William proved that he possessed all of these qualities. When they received a call about a fishing vessel in distress off the Welsh coast, he flew the helicopter through challenging weather conditions while his crew prepared to lower a rescue specialist to the deck of the troubled boat. The success of that mission, and many others that followed, established William's reputation as a skilled and dedicated pilot. His fellow crew members spoke highly of his professionalism and his willingness to take on the most dangerous aspects of their work without hesitation. Word began to spread throughout the military aviation community that Prince William wasn't just a royal playing at being a pilot. He was a genuine asset to the search and rescue force. As his experience grew, so did his understanding of the broader role that military aviation played in protecting British interests around the world. He began to see how helicopters were used not just for rescue operations, but for combat missions, transport duties, and reconnaissance work. Each of these roles required different skills and presented unique challenges, but all were united by the common thread of service to country and commitment to excellence. The years Williams spent as an operational pilot shaped his understanding of military service in ways that no amount of theoretical study could have achieved. He learned what it meant to put the needs of others before his own safety, to work as part of a team where everyone's life depended on everyone else's competence, and to maintain the highest standards of performance even when exhausted or under pressure. These lessons would prove invaluable when he was eventually called upon to take on greater responsibilities within the military hierarchy. His time at RAF Valley also taught him about the sacrifices made by military families. He lived alongside other pilots and their families, sharing in their celebrations and supporting them through difficult times. When crew members were deployed overseas or faced long periods of training away from home, Williams saw firsthand how these commitments affected their relationships and family life. This experience gave him a deeper appreciation for the dedication of military personnel and their loved ones. As Williams' tour of duty at RAF Valley neared its end, senior military officials began to take notice of his performance and potential. Reports from his commanding officers consistently praised his flying skills, his leadership qualities, and his commitment to the mission. It became clear that he wasn't just a competent pilot. He had the potential to take on significant leadership roles within the military aviation community. The question of what role Williams should play in the military had been a subject of discussion within royal circles for some time. Traditional royal duties required him to take on ceremonial positions with various military units, but his operational experience as a pilot had given him credentials that went far beyond the typical honorary appointments. Military leaders recognized that his combination of practical experience and royal status could be valuable in bridging the gap between the armed forces and the general public. When discussions began about the future of the Army Air Corps, Williams' name naturally came up as a potential leader. The Corps had a distinguished history dating back to the early days of military aviation, and it needed someone who could honor that legacy while guiding it into the modern era. Williams' experience as an operational pilot, combined with his understanding of royal duty, made him an ideal candidate for the role of Colonel-in-Chief. The Army Air Corps had been waiting for this moment for decades. Since its formation in 1957, the Corps had served as the backbone of British military aviation, providing crucial support to ground forces and conducting specialized operations that required the unique capabilities of rotary-wing aircraft. Throughout its history, the Corps had been led by distinguished military officers who understood both the technical demands of helicopter warfare and the human cost of military service. When Queen Elizabeth II announced that Prince William would become the new Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps, the news was met with widespread approval throughout the military community. Unlike many ceremonial appointments, this wasn't just about having a royal figurehead to attend parades and ceremonies. Williams' operational experience as a search and rescue pilot meant he understood the challenges faced by military aviators, and his leadership potential had been proven during his years of active service. The appointment also carried deep personal significance for the royal family. Queen Elizabeth II had served as Colonel-in-Chief of numerous military units throughout her long reign, and she understood the importance of maintaining strong connections between the monarchy and the armed forces. By appointing William to lead the Army Air Corps, she was ensuring that this tradition would continue with someone who had earned the right to lead through his own service and sacrifice. The announcement came at a time when the British military was undergoing significant changes. Budget constraints, evolving threats, and advancing technology were forcing all branches of the armed forces to adapt and modernize. The Army Air Corps, in particular, faced challenges in maintaining its fleet of aging aircraft while incorporating new technologies that would keep British forces competitive on the modern battlefield. William's appointment was seen as a sign that the military leadership was serious about investing in the future of military aviation. For William, accepting the role of Colonel-in-Chief represented both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. He understood that the men and women of the Army Air Corps will be looking to him not just for ceremonial leadership, but for genuine advocacy and support. His years as an operational pilot had taught him about the daily challenges faced by military aviators, from the technical demands of maintaining complex aircraft to the personal stress of being constantly ready to deploy at a moment's notice. The formal ceremony announcing his appointment took place at the Army Air Corps Center at Middle Wallop, the spiritual home of British military helicopter aviation. The base, located in the rolling hills of Hampshire, had been training helicopter pilots for over half a century, and its hangars and airfields had witnessed countless moments of triumph and tragedy. For William, walking onto the base as the newly appointed Colonel-in-Chief was like returning to a familiar world, but with a completely different set of responsibilities. The ceremony itself was carefully planned to honor both tradition and innovation. Representatives from every squadron in the Army Air Corps were present, along with veteran pilots who had served during some of the most challenging operations in British military history. As William took the salute, he was acutely aware that he was joining a brotherhood of aviators who had risked their lives in conflicts ranging from the Falklands War to the recent operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. During his acceptance speech, William spoke about his commitment to ensuring that the Army Air Corps would continue to receive the support and resources it needed to fulfill its mission. He emphasized that his role wasn't just ceremonial, but that he intended to be an active advocate for military aviation within government and royal circles. His words were met with genuine enthusiasm from the assembled personnel, who recognized that they now had a leader who understood their world from the inside. The transition from operational pilot to military leader required William to develop new skills and perspectives. While flying helicopters demanded technical expertise and quick reflexes, leading a military organization required strategic thinking, political awareness, and the ability to balance competing priorities. He began working closely with senior Army Air Corps officers to understand the full scope of the Corps' mission and the challenges it faced in carrying out its responsibilities. One of the first issues William encountered was the ongoing debate about aircraft procurement and modernization. The Army Air Corps operated a variety of helicopter types, each designed for specific missions and operating environments. The Apache attack helicopters were among the most sophisticated combat aircraft in the world, capable of engaging enemy forces with precision-guided weapons while providing close support to ground troops. The Lynx and Gazelle helicopters served in reconnaissance and light transport roles, while the newer Wildcat aircraft were being introduced to replace aging platforms. William quickly realized that maintaining this diverse fleet required significant financial investment and political support. Military aviation was expensive, and there was always pressure to reduce defense spending in favor of other government priorities. As Colonel-in-Chief, he would need to use his influence to ensure that politicians and civil servants understood the vital role played by Army Air Corps helicopters in protecting British interests around the world. His approach to this challenge was characteristically direct and practical. Rather than simply advocating for more funding, William focused on demonstrating the value provided by military aviation. He arranged for government officials and members of Parliament to visit Army Air Corps bases, where they could see firsthand the training and dedication required to master helicopter operations. He also ensured that the media had access to Corps personnel during major exercises and deployments, helping to raise public awareness of their contribution to national security. The impact of William's leadership became apparent during his first major public appearance as Colonel-in-Chief. During a large-scale military exercise in the English countryside, he flew as co-pilot in an Apache helicopter that was demonstrating the latest tactics for supporting ground forces. The exercise was being observed by senior military officials from NATO countries, and William's participation sent a clear message about the British commitment to military aviation excellence. As the Apache maneuvered through complex attack patterns, engaging simulated enemy targets while avoiding defensive systems, William demonstrated that his flying skills had not diminished during his transition to leadership roles. His ability to perform at the highest level while representing the Army Air Corps to international observers reinforced his credibility as both a pilot and a leader. The exercise was considered a tremendous success, and William's role in its execution was widely praised by military professionals. Beyond the high-profile ceremonies and exercises, William also focused on the human side of military leadership. He made it a priority to visit Army Air Corps bases around the country, meeting with pilots, ground crew, and support personnel to understand their concerns and challenges. These visits were not mere photo opportunities, but genuine attempts to maintain connection with the people who made military aviation possible. During one such visit to a forward operating base, William spent time with mechanics who were working around the clock to keep helicopters operational during a major training exercise. He learned about the technical challenges they faced, the long hours they worked, and the pride they took in ensuring that aircraft were ready for any mission. This interaction reinforced his understanding that military aviation success depended not just on skilled pilots, but on entire teams of dedicated professionals working together toward common goals. William also recognized the importance of supporting military families, drawing on his own experience of growing up in a family where duty and service were paramount values. He established programs to provide better support for the spouses and children of Army Air Corps personnel, understanding that military effectiveness depended partly on the stability and well-being of military families. These programs included improved access to family housing, educational support for military children, and counseling services for families dealing with the stress of frequent deployments. The international dimension of William's role as Colonel-in-Chief became apparent during joint training exercises with Allied forces. Military aviation had become increasingly collaborative, with British helicopters often working alongside aircraft from the United States, France, Germany, and other NATO allies. Williams' participation in these exercises helped strengthen relationships between military aviation communities and demonstrated British commitment to collective security. One particularly significant exercise took place in Eastern Europe, where Army Air Corps helicopters worked with American Apache units and French Tiger helicopters to practice coordinated operations. The exercise was designed to demonstrate NATO's ability to respond quickly to threats against member nations, and the seamless integration of different helicopter types was crucial to its success. Williams' presence during the exercise, both as a working pilot and as a royal representative, helped reinforce the political importance of military cooperation. The lessons learned during these international exercises also influenced Williams' thinking about the future of the Army Air Corps. He began to advocate for greater standardization of equipment and procedures with Allied forces, understanding that future conflicts would likely require rapid deployment and integration with partners from around the world. This perspective influenced procurement decisions and training programs, ensuring that British military aviation would remain compatible with Allied forces. Williams' growing influence within military aviation circles also gave him opportunities to advocate for innovation and modernization. He became a supporter of research into unmanned aircraft systems, understanding that the future of military aviation would likely include both manned and unmanned platforms working together. While he remained committed to the importance of skilled human pilots, he recognized that technology could enhance their effectiveness and reduce the risks they faced. The balance between tradition and innovation became a recurring theme in Williams' leadership of the Army Air Corps. He understood the importance of honoring the legacy of previous generations of military aviators while ensuring that current personnel had access to the best possible equipment and training. This meant supporting both the preservation of historical aircraft and the development of cutting-edge technology that would keep British forces competitive in future conflicts. As Williams settled into his role as Colonel-in-Chief, the Army Air Corps began to reflect his influence in numerous ways. Training programs were updated to incorporate lessons learned from recent operations. Maintenance procedures were streamlined to improve aircraft availability, and personnel policies were revised to better support career development and family life. These changes were implemented gradually and with careful consideration of their impact on operational effectiveness. The transformation was not just procedural, but cultural. Under Williams' leadership, the Army Air Corps developed a stronger sense of identity and purpose, with personnel at all levels understanding their role in the broader mission of defending British interests. The Prince's combination of operational experience and royal status gave him unique credibility in advocating for the Corps within government and military circles, and this advocacy translated into tangible improvements in resources and support. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Middle Wallop as Prince William approached the waiting Apache helicopter. Today would be different from his previous flights as Colonel-in-Chief. This wasn't a ceremonial flight or a training exercise. This was his first operational mission in his new role, and the weight of command sat heavily on his shoulders. The aircraft before him represented decades of technological advancement and billions of pounds in investment, but more importantly, it represented the trust placed in him by thousands of Army Air Corps personnel. As William conducted his pre-flight inspection, running his hands along the aircraft's armored hull and checking the weapon systems that made the Apache one of the world's most feared attack helicopters, he thought about the path that had brought him to this moment. The transition from search and rescue pilot to military leader had required him to develop new perspectives on the role of aviation in modern warfare. Where once he had focused on saving lives, he now had to consider how military aviation could be used to protect British interests in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. The mission briefing had been comprehensive and sobering. Intelligence reports indicated that British forces in a troubled region were facing increased pressure from hostile forces, and the Army Air Corps had been tasked with providing close air support to ground troops who were operating in dangerous territory. The Apache helicopters would work in coordination with ground forces to neutralize threats while minimizing the risk to civilian populations. It was exactly the kind of complex operation that demonstrated why military aviation required not just technical skill, but sound judgment and moral courage. Williams' crew for this mission included some of the most experienced pilots and weapons officers in the Army Air Corps. Their presence was both reassuring and challenging. Reassuring because he knew he was flying with the best, but challenging because he understood that his performance would be closely watched and evaluated. As Colonel-in-Chief, he couldn't afford to be anything less than exemplary in his execution of the mission. The flight to the operational area took them over terrain that had been shaped by centuries of military history. Below them, ancient battlefields where British soldiers had fought and died in conflicts spanning from medieval times to the modern era served as a reminder of the continuity of military service. William understood that he was part of this long tradition, carrying forward the legacy of those who had served before him while adapting to the unique challenges of contemporary warfare. As they approached the operational zone, the radio chatter increased in intensity. Ground forces were reporting contact with hostile elements, and the situation was developing rapidly. Williams' training kicked in as he processed the incoming information, analyzed the tactical situation, and prepared to coordinate with other aircraft and ground units. The complexity of modern military operations was staggering, involving multiple aircraft types, various ground units, and sophisticated communication and navigation systems that had to work flawlessly under extreme pressure. The Apache's advanced sensor systems provided William and his crew with a detailed picture of the battlefield below. Thermal imaging revealed the positions of friendly forces, while radar systems tracked potential threats. The helicopter's weapons systems were capable of engaging targets with precision that would have been unimaginable just a generation earlier. But the technology also placed enormous responsibility on the crew to ensure that their actions were both militarily effective and morally justifiable. When the call came for close air support, William felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied combat operations. Despite all his training and experience, the reality of engaging in hostile action was always intense and demanding. The Apache moved into position with practiced precision, its crew working together with the seamless coordination that came from countless hours of training and preparation. Every movement was deliberate and calculated, designed to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing their exposure to enemy fire. The engagement itself was brief but decisive. Using the Apache's advanced targeting systems, Williams' crew was able to neutralize the threat to ground forces with minimal collateral damage. The precision of modern military aviation allowed them to strike only legitimate targets while avoiding harm to civilians or non-combatants. As they pulled away from the target area, William reflected on how different this experience was from his search and rescue missions, where the goal had been exclusively to preserve life. Here, the preservation of British lives required the use of lethal force against those who threatened them. The return flight to base provided an opportunity for reflection on the broader implications of military leadership. As Colonel-in-Chief, William was responsible not just for his own performance, but for ensuring that the entire Army Air Corps was prepared to carry out similar missions with the same level of professionalism and effectiveness. This responsibility extended beyond tactical considerations to include the welfare of personnel, the maintenance of equipment, and the development of doctrine that would guide future operations. Back at Middle Wallop, the post-mission debrief was thorough and honest. Every aspect of the operation was analyzed, from initial planning through execution to final assessment of results. William participated fully in this process, understanding that continuous improvement was essential to maintaining military effectiveness. The feedback from his crew and from ground forces was positive, but he knew that success in one mission was just the beginning of his responsibilities as a military leader. The days following the operational mission were filled with meetings, briefings, and administrative tasks that were less dramatic but equally important. William found himself reviewing budget proposals for aircraft maintenance, personnel policies for pilot training, and strategic assessments of future threats that might require Army Air Corps intervention. The breadth of responsibilities that came with military leadership was enormous, requiring expertise in areas ranging from technology and logistics to human resources and international relations. One of the most challenging aspects of William's new role was balancing his responsibilities as Colonel-in-Chief with his other duties as a member of the royal family. Royal engagements, state functions, and ceremonial obligations continued to demand significant time and attention, but William was determined not to treat his military role as merely another ceremonial position. He insisted on being actively involved in the day-to-day operations of the Army Air Corps, even when this created scheduling conflicts with other royal duties. This commitment to active leadership was tested during a major international crisis that required the deployment of British forces to a volatile region. As Colonel-in-Chief, William was involved in the planning and execution of the Army Air Corps contribution to the operation, which included both attack helicopters for combat missions and transport helicopters for logistic support. The complexity of the deployment required careful coordination with other military units, allied forces, and political leadership at the highest levels of government. William's role in the crisis response demonstrated the value of having military leaders who combined operational experience with broader strategic understanding. His ability to communicate with both military personnel and political officials helped ensure that decision-makers at all levels had accurate information about the capabilities and limitations of military aviation. This communication was crucial in developing realistic expectations for what could be accomplished through military intervention. The deployment also highlighted some of the ongoing challenges facing the Army Air Corps. The demand for helicopter support consistently exceeded the available resources, requiring difficult decisions about priorities and resource allocation. William found himself advocating for increased investment in military aviation while also working to maximize the effectiveness of existing resources. This balancing act required diplomatic skills as well as military expertise, as he worked to build support for Army Air Corps needs within government and military hierarchies. During the height of the crisis, William made the decision to deploy with Army Air Corps units to the operational area. This decision was controversial within royal circles, as it placed a senior member of the royal family in potential danger. However, William argued that effective leadership required sharing the risks faced by the personnel under his command. His presence in the operational area provided a powerful symbol of royal commitment to military service, while also giving him first-hand experience of the challenges faced by deployed forces. The deployment lasted several months and provided William with invaluable insights into the realities of modern military operations. He witnessed the dedication and professionalism of Army Air Corps personnel operating under difficult conditions, far from home and family. He also experienced the frustrations and challenges that came with limited resources, complex rules of engagement, and the constant pressure to achieve military objectives while minimizing casualties and collateral damage. One particularly memorable moment came during a night operation when Williams Apache provided escort for a medical evacuation helicopter extracting wounded soldiers from a remote outpost. The mission required flying in complete darkness through hostile territory, relying on night vision systems and sophisticated navigation equipment to avoid both enemy fire and natural obstacles. The successful completion of the mission, which resulted in saving the lives of several seriously wounded soldiers, reinforced Williams' understanding of why military aviation was so crucial to modern military operations. The human cost of military service became real to William in ways that no amount of training or preparation could have achieved. He attended memorial services for fallen comrades, visited wounded personnel in military hospitals, and witnessed the impact of deployment on military families. These experiences deepened his appreciation for the sacrifices made by military personnel and strengthened his resolve to ensure that they received the support and recognition they deserved. As the crisis subsided and Army Air Corps units began returning to their home bases, William faced the challenge of capturing the lessons learned and incorporating them into future training and doctrine. The operational experience had revealed both strengths and weaknesses in Army Air Corps capabilities, and addressing these issues would require sustained effort and resources. William worked with senior military officials to develop comprehensive recommendations for improvements in equipment, training, and personnel policies. The return to routine operations after the deployment provided an opportunity for William to reflect on how his role as Colonel-in-Chief was evolving. The combination of operational experience and strategic responsibility had given him a unique perspective on military aviation that few leaders possessed. He began to see opportunities to use this perspective to influence policy decisions and resource allocation at the highest levels of government and military leadership. William's growing influence became apparent during discussions about the future structure of British military aviation. Budget pressures and changing strategic priorities required difficult decisions about which capabilities to maintain and which to reduce or eliminate. His advocacy for the Army Air Corps, based on demonstrated operational effectiveness and strategic importance, helped ensure that military aviation received appropriate priority in these discussions. The transformation of William from operational pilot to strategic leader was gradual but profound. Where once he had focused on mastering the technical aspects of helicopter flight, he now had to consider the broader implications of military aviation for British security and international relations. This evolution required him to develop new skills in areas ranging from budget analysis and personnel management to international diplomacy and public communications. As William prepared for his next major challenge as Colonel-in-Chief, he carried with him the lessons learned from months of operational experience and strategic responsibility. The weight of command had proven to be both heavier and more rewarding than he had anticipated. Leading the Army Air Corps was not just about flying helicopters or attending ceremonies. It was about shaping the future of military aviation and ensuring that British forces remained capable of protecting national interests in an uncertain world. The hangar at Middle Wallop was filled with an unusual mixture of old and new as Prince William prepared for what many considered to be the most significant flight of his tenure as Colonel-in-Chief. Alongside the sleek, modern Apache helicopters that represented the cutting edge of military aviation technology sat a restored Westland Scout, one of the aircraft that had formed the backbone of the Army Air Corps during its early years. The contrast was striking and symbolic, representing the evolution of military aviation from simple utility aircraft to sophisticated weapons systems capable of changing the course of battles. William had requested this particular combination of aircraft for today's ceremonial flight, understanding that his role as Colonel-in-Chief required him to honor the past while preparing for the future. The Scout helicopter, with its basic instrumentation and straightforward controls, reminded him of the pioneering pilots who had established the traditions and standards that continued to guide the Army Air Corps decades later. These early aviators had operated with minimal technology and maximum courage, laying the foundation for everything that followed. The planning for this flight had taken months and involved coordination between military historians, current operational units, and Royal Protocol officers. The route would take William over sites of historical significance to British military aviation, from the early training grounds where pilots had learned to fly during World War I to the modern facilities where today's aviators mastered the complexities of digital warfare. Each location along the route told part of the story of how military aviation had evolved from a curiosity to an essential component of national defense. As William walked between the two helicopters, he reflected on how much had changed since his early days as a search and rescue pilot. The technology available to modern military aviators was extraordinary, with systems that could track multiple targets simultaneously, coordinate with ground forces in real time, and deliver precision weapons with minimal risk to friendly forces. Yet the fundamental qualities required of military pilots, courage, skill, and dedication, remained unchanged from the earliest days of military aviation. The first leg of the ceremonial flight would be in the restored Scout, accompanied by a veteran pilot who had flown similar aircraft during some of the Army Air Corps' most challenging operations. Squadron leader Michael Harrison had served 3 tours of duty in Northern Ireland during the height of the Troubles, flying missions that required extraordinary skill and courage in the face of constant threats from hostile forces. His presence on this flight provided a direct connection to the operational history that William was committed to preserving and honoring. As they lifted off from Middle Wallop in the Scout, William was struck by the simplicity and directness of the aircraft's controls. Unlike the sophisticated flight management systems of modern helicopters, the Scout required constant attention and manual input from the pilot. Every gust of wind, every change in power setting, and every navigation decision required immediate response. Flying this aircraft reminded him of the fundamental skills that all pilots needed to master, regardless of the sophistication of their equipment. The first stop on their route was the Imperial War Museum's aircraft collection, where examples of military aircraft from throughout British aviation history were preserved for future generations. William had specifically requested permission to conduct a ceremonial flyover of the museum, understanding that the preserved aircraft below represented the technological and human achievement that had made modern military aviation possible. The flyover was timed to coincide with a special exhibition honoring the centenary of military helicopter development, providing a powerful visual connection between past and present. From the Imperial War Museum, the flight continued to RAF Odium, home to the Royal Air Force's Chinook Helicopter Force. The base represented the joint nature of modern military aviation, where Army Air Corps, Royal Air Force, and Royal Navy aircraft often worked together on complex operations. William's visit to Odium emphasized his commitment to inter-service cooperation and his understanding that the future of military aviation would require breaking down traditional barriers between different branches of the armed forces. At Odium, William transferred from the Scout to a modern Chinook helicopter for the next phase of the flight. The transition between aircraft types highlighted the dramatic evolution in helicopter capability over the decades. Where the Scout could carry a few passengers over relatively short distances, the Chinook could transport dozens of troops or tons of equipment across vast distances in all weather conditions. The technological advancement was impressive, but William understood that it also represented increased complexity and higher training requirements for the personnel who operated these sophisticated machines. The Chinook flight took them over the Salisbury Plain training area, where British forces had been practicing military operations for over a century. Below them, current Army Air Corps units were conducting training exercises that combined helicopter operations with ground forces, artillery, and air support from other services. The exercises demonstrated the integrated nature of modern warfare, where success depended on seamless coordination between different types of military units and equipment. Watching the training exercise from above, William was reminded of the complexity of his responsibilities as Colonel-in-Chief. The Army Air Corps didn't operate in isolation, but as part of a larger military system that required constant coordination and communication. His role involved not just advocating for helicopter units, but ensuring that they could work effectively with other military components to achieve strategic objectives. This required understanding not just aviation, but ground operations, logistics, communications, and intelligence gathering. The final aircraft change of the day brought William back to familiar territory as he climbed into the cockpit of an Apache attack helicopter for the concluding portion of the ceremonial flight. The Apache represented the current pinnacle of military helicopter technology, with systems that could engage targets at ranges that earlier generations of pilots could never have imagined. Yet William understood that technology alone didn't guarantee success. It still required skilled and dedicated personnel to operate effectively. The Apache portion of the flight took them over the Farnborough International Airshow site, where military and civilian aviation companies were displaying their latest technological achievements. The airshow represented the ongoing innovation that kept military aviation at the forefront of technological development, but it also highlighted the international nature of modern defense industries. British military aviation depended not just on domestic capabilities, but on cooperation with allies and partners around the world. As they approached the final destination of the ceremonial flight, William reflected on the lessons learned during his day aloft. Each aircraft had taught him something different about the evolution of military aviation and the challenges facing current and future operations. The Scout had reminded him of the fundamental flying skills that remained essential regardless of technological advancement. The Chinook had demonstrated the importance of logistics and transport capabilities in modern military operations. The Apache had shown him the cutting edge of military technology and the responsibilities that came with such sophisticated capabilities. The landing at the conclusion of the ceremonial flight was witnessed by hundreds of Army Air Corps personnel, their families, and distinguished guests from government and military leadership. The event had been carefully planned to serve multiple purposes, honoring the history of military aviation, demonstrating current capabilities, and highlighting the vision for future development. Williams' participation in the flight, using aircraft from different eras of military aviation, provided a powerful symbol of continuity and evolution. During the reception that followed the flight, William had the opportunity to meet with personnel from across the Army Air Corps, from newly qualified pilots to veteran mechanics with decades of experience. These conversations reinforced his understanding that military aviation success depended on entire communities of dedicated professionals, not just the pilots who flew the aircraft. Mechanics, logistics specialists, communications technicians, and support personnel all played crucial roles in ensuring that helicopters were available when and where they were needed. The conversations also highlighted some of the ongoing challenges facing military aviation. Personnel retention was a constant concern, as the skills required for military aviation were in high demand in the civilian sector. The Army Air Corps found itself competing with commercial aviation companies, defense contractors, and other industries for the talented individuals needed to maintain and operate sophisticated military aircraft. William understood that addressing this challenge would require not just competitive compensation, but also meaningful career development opportunities and recognition of the important work performed by military aviation professionals. Another recurring theme in his conversations with Army Air Corps personnel was the pace of technological change. The aircraft and systems they worked with were constantly being upgraded and modified to incorporate new capabilities and address emerging threats. This required continuous training and education to ensure that personnel could operate effectively with evolving technology. William recognized that his role as Colonel-in-Chief included advocating for the resources needed to maintain this training pipeline and keep Army Air Corps capabilities at the forefront of military aviation. The international dimension of military aviation also featured prominently in discussions during the reception. Modern military operations frequently involve cooperation with allied forces, requiring standardization of procedures and equipment that allowed different military units to work together effectively. Williams' conversations with visiting military officers from allied nations highlighted the importance of maintaining these relationships and continuing to develop interoperable capabilities. As the reception concluded and William prepared to return to his other royal duties, he carried with him a deepened appreciation for the complexity and importance of military aviation. The ceremonial flight had served its intended purpose of honoring the past and looking toward the future, but it had also reinforced his understanding of the day-to-day challenges faced by the men and women of the Army Air Corps. The weeks following the ceremonial flight were filled with follow-up activities designed to build on the momentum generated by the event. William worked with Army Air Corps leadership to develop new initiatives for preserving military aviation history, while also investing in future capabilities. These initiatives included expanded museum partnerships, enhanced training programs, and increased cooperation with academic institutions researching military aviation technology and tactics. Williams' growing expertise in military aviation also led to increased involvement in policy discussions at the highest levels of government. His unique combination of operational experience, strategic understanding, and royal status gave him access to decision-makers who might otherwise have limited exposure to military aviation issues. He used this access to advocate for policies that would support the long-term health and effectiveness of British military aviation capabilities. One of the most significant policy discussions involved the future of military aviation training. The increasing sophistication of military aircraft required longer and more expensive training programs, but budget constraints limited the resources available for this training. William worked with military and civilian leaders to develop innovative approaches to training that leverage simulation technology and international cooperation to provide high-quality instruction while controlling costs. The success of these policy initiatives reinforced William's understanding that his role as Colonel-in-Chief extended far beyond ceremonial functions. He was becoming a genuine advocate and leader for military aviation, using his influence and expertise to shape the future of the Army Air Corps and British military aviation more broadly. This evolution in his role was both rewarding and challenging, requiring him to balance his military responsibilities with his other duties as a senior member of the royal family. As William looked ahead to future challenges and opportunities, he understood that his ceremonial flight had marked not just a celebration of military aviation history, but the beginning of a new phase in his leadership of the Army Air Corps. The lessons learned during the flight, the relationships built during the reception, and the initiatives launched in its aftermath would all contribute to strengthening British military aviation for future generations. The final approach to Middle Wallop came as the afternoon sun painted the Hampshire countryside in golden hues, creating long shadows across the airfield that had become so familiar to Prince William during his tenure as Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps. Today's flight was different from all the others that had come before it. This wasn't a training exercise, a ceremonial event, or an operational mission. This was William's personal reflection flight, a solo journey in an Apache helicopter that would allow him to contemplate how far he had traveled, both literally and figuratively, since accepting the responsibility of leading Britain's military aviation elite. As he guided the Apache through its final descent, William's mind wandered back to the conversation he had shared with his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, just weeks before her passing. They had sat in the drawing room at Windsor Castle, surrounded by portraits of monarchs who had ruled Britain through centuries of triumph and adversity. The Queen had spoken about the weight of duty, the importance of service, and the responsibility that came with leadership during times of uncertainty and change. She had told him that being a successful military leader required more than understanding tactics, technology, or logistics. It required understanding people, their fears, their hopes, their motivations, and their dreams. The men and women of the Army Air Corps weren't just personnel numbers or operational assets. They were individuals with families, ambitions, and concerns about the future. A true leader, she had said, found ways to address these human needs while also accomplishing the mission. The Apache touched down smoothly on the familiar tarmac, and William completed the shutdown procedures with the practiced efficiency that came from hundreds of hours in the cockpit. As the rotor blades spun down and the engines wound to silence, he reflected on how this aircraft had become a symbol of his evolution as a leader. The Apache represented the pinnacle of military technology, but it also represented the trust placed in him by thousands of personnel who depended on his advocacy and leadership. Stepping out of the aircraft, William was met by Air Commodore Sarah Mitchell, the senior Army Air Corps officer who had worked most closely with him during his tenure as Colonel-in-Chief. Their partnership had been instrumental in implementing many of the changes and improvements that had strengthened the Corps over the previous months. Mitchell's practical experience and William's strategic influence had proven to be an effective combination in addressing the challenges facing military aviation. Their conversation as they walked toward the operations building covered familiar ground, but with a new perspective. The Army Air Corps had evolved significantly during William's leadership, not just in terms of equipment and procedures, but in its sense of identity and purpose. Personnel at all levels spoke with increased pride about their service and showed greater confidence in their leadership. Recruitment and retention had improved, and the Corps had successfully competed for resources and support within the broader military structure. The transformation hadn't happened overnight or without challenges. There had been budget battles, personnel disputes, and disagreements about priorities and strategies. William had learned that military leadership required not just vision and determination, but patience and diplomatic skills. Building consensus among diverse stakeholders, from junior enlisted personnel to senior government officials, required careful communication and persistent advocacy. One of William's most significant achievements had been the development of a comprehensive long-term strategy for Army Air Corps modernization. This strategy balanced the need for new technology with the importance of maintaining essential capabilities during the transition period. It also addressed personnel development, international cooperation, and the integration of military aviation with other defense capabilities. The strategy had gained support from government leaders, military officials, and industry partners, providing a roadmap for the Corps' development over the coming decade. The implementation of this strategy had already begun to show results. New training programs were producing more capable pilots and ground personnel. Maintenance procedures have been streamlined to improve aircraft availability and reduce costs. International partnerships were providing access to advanced technologies and training opportunities. Most importantly, the morale and effectiveness of Army Air Corps personnel had improved measurably. As William and Air Commodore Mitchell entered the operations building, they encountered a group of young pilot trainees who were beginning their helicopter training. Their enthusiasm and dedication reminded William of his own early days in military aviation, when the complexity and responsibility of military flying had seemed both exciting and intimidating. These new pilots would inherit the legacy that he and countless others had worked to build and improve. Speaking with the trainees, William was struck by their sophisticated understanding of the challenges facing modern military aviation. They were well informed about technological developments, geopolitical trends, and the evolving nature of military threats. Their questions demonstrated that they were thinking not just about learning to fly helicopters, but about how military aviation could contribute to national security in an uncertain world. This level of awareness and engagement was encouraging and suggested that the future of the Army Air Corps would be in capable hands. The conversation with the trainees also highlighted some of the ongoing challenges that would require continued attention from military leaders. The pace of technological change showed no signs of slowing, and keeping up with developments in areas like artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, and electronic warfare would require sustained investment in both equipment and personnel development. The trainees understood these challenges and were eager to be part of the solutions. From the operations building, William and Air Commodore Mitchell proceeded to the maintenance hangars, where the technical personnel who kept the helicopters flying were working on various aircraft. The maintenance crews represented one of the Corps' most valuable and often underappreciated assets. Their expertise and dedication ensured that sophisticated military aircraft remained operational despite the demanding conditions of military service. William had made it a priority during his tenure to recognize and support the maintenance personnel, understanding that their work was just as crucial to military aviation success as the skills of the pilots. He had advocated for improved training opportunities, better working conditions, and recognition programs that highlighted their contributions. These efforts had resulted in improved retention rates and higher levels of job satisfaction among technical personnel. The maintenance hangar visit also provided an opportunity to see some of the latest technological developments being incorporated into Army Air Corps aircraft. New communication systems, updated sensors, and improved defensive systems were being installed to keep British helicopters competitive with the most advanced aircraft operated by potential adversaries. The complexity of these systems required highly trained personnel and sophisticated support infrastructure. As the afternoon progressed, William participated in a comprehensive briefing about current and future Army Air Corps operations. The briefing covered ongoing deployments, upcoming exercises, and planned equipment acquisitions. It also addressed some of the strategic challenges facing military aviation in an era of budget constraints and evolving threats. The breadth and complexity of these issues reinforced Williams' understanding of why effective military leadership required both operational experience and strategic thinking. One of the most significant topics covered in the briefing was the integration of unmanned aircraft systems with traditional helicopter operations. This integration promised to enhance the capabilities of human pilots while also reducing their exposure to dangerous situations. However, it also raised questions about training, doctrine, and the future role of human operators in military aviation. William had been instrumental in developing policies that embraced technological innovation while preserving the essential human elements of military aviation. The briefing also addressed international cooperation and alliance relationships. Modern military operations increasingly required coordination with allied forces, and the Army Air Corps had developed strong partnerships with helicopter units from the United States, France, Germany, and other NATO allies. These partnerships provided opportunities for shared training, joint operations, and collaborative development of new technologies and tactics. As evening approached, William found himself in the officers' mess, sharing dinner with Army Air Corps personnel from across the rank structure. These informal conversations often provided the most valuable insights into the health and morale of the organization. Personnel felt free to discuss their concerns, suggestions, and observations about military aviation in a relaxed environment where rank differences seemed less important. The dinner conversations revealed a military organization that was confident about its capabilities and optimistic about its future. Personnel spoke enthusiastically about recent achievements and expressed confidence in their leadership and direction. They also demonstrated a clear understanding of their role in the broader context of British defense and international security. This level of awareness and engagement was a testament to the effectiveness of the leadership development programs that William had supported. During the dinner, William also learned about some of the personal challenges faced by military aviation personnel and their families. Frequent deployments, demanding training schedules, and the inherent dangers of military aviation place significant stress on personal relationships and family life. Addressing these challenges required comprehensive support programs and policies that recognize the human cost of military service. The evening concluded with a ceremony recognizing several Army Air Corps personnel for exceptional service and achievement. The awards covered a range of contributions, from outstanding flying performance to innovative maintenance solutions to leadership excellence. William presented the awards personally, understanding that recognition for exceptional service was one of the most important functions of military leadership. As he presented each award, William reflected on the qualities that made military aviation personnel exceptional. Technical competence was essential, but it wasn't sufficient. The best military aviators also demonstrated courage, integrity, teamwork, and commitment to something larger than themselves. These qualities couldn't be taught through formal training programs. They had to be developed through experience, mentorship, and personal commitment to excellence. The ceremony also provided an opportunity for William to articulate his vision for the future of the Army Air Corps. He spoke about the importance of maintaining the highest standards of professionalism while also embracing innovation and change. He emphasized that the Corps' greatest strength was its people and that investing in personnel development was just as important as acquiring new equipment. As William prepared to depart Middle Wallop that evening, he carried with him a deep sense of satisfaction about what had been accomplished during his tenure as Colonel-in-Chief, but also a clear understanding of the work that remained to be done. The Army Air Corps was stronger and more capable than it had been when he assumed leadership, but the challenges facing military aviation continued to evolve and would require sustained attention and leadership. The drive back to London provided time for reflection on the broader implications of his military service. His experience as Colonel-in-Chief had prepared him for future responsibilities as a senior member of the royal family and eventual king. The lessons learned about leadership, responsibility, and service would influence his approach to all aspects of his public life. Most importantly, his time with the Army Air Corps had reinforced his understanding that effective leadership required more than position or authority. It required earning the respect and trust of those being led through competence, integrity, and genuine concern for their welfare. These lessons would serve him well in all his future endeavors, whether military, royal, or personal. As the lights of London appeared in the distance, William understood that his journey with the Army Air Corps was far from over. His role as Colonel-in-Chief would continue to evolve, presenting new challenges and opportunities for service. The foundation built during his initial tenure would support whatever came next, and the relationships formed with Army Air Corps personnel would endure regardless of how his responsibilities might change. The helicopter flight that had begun as a personal reflection had become something more significant, a recognition of how military service had shaped not just his leadership skills, but his character and values. The boy who had dreamed of flying had become a man who understood that the privilege of flight came with the responsibility to serve others. That understanding would guide him through whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead in his journey from prince to king.